Welcome back to Mr. Orr's Flip Classroom for Grammar. Today we'll be looking at different verb forms and helping verbs. Here's an example of what your notes page may look like, where you're going to be filling in examples and blanks from the notes, as well as doing the practice together and on your own, and the sentence lab. Let's get started. So you've already studied action verbs and linking verbs. Part of understanding that as well is understanding that there are verbs that aren't action or linking. Those are helping verbs. They go with the action or linking verbs already in the sentence. Then the action or linking verbs that we're already familiar with, how they're used falls into one of four different forms or parts. Some definitions for this lesson. Parts of a verb. This is not going to be considered the same as the verb tense. That can be confusing given that some of the terms are going to be the same for verb tense and verb parts. Not a great plan by whoever decided to label these things in the English language. Think of it more like the form of a verb that's used to best fit the time of the sentence. So the form is the part of a verb is what we use to actually create verb tense along with helping verbs. So the parts of a verb can be the present. In English, that's the base form, the one we think of as being the one you start with, the regular form of the word. That's no suffix, no helping verb. The present participle. That word is pronounced participle. So the present participle is actually the easiest form of the verb to spot. It's one that always ends in ing or ing as a suffix. The past part of a verb, most commonly that's your ed form. So it's not the same as the present. It's the past form, oftentimes is ed. Again, past is no helping form. And the past participle. Past participle is the form used following a helping verb. Most often, this is going to be either ed or en. So as you already can see, since both the past and past participle can end in the same letters, that already is a possible point of confusion. And that's not even considering verbs we call or consider irregular, ones that don't follow these normal rules. We'll talk about those in a later lesson. So some examples of how this progression works. If we take the verb look is the basic form, the one we use to start with. That's the present form. It can be look or looks, but the look is the basic form. We start with that. When you start learning other languages that come from Latin, like Spanish, French, or Italian, they use the infinitive, the to look, to break, to walk form of that word, to look. And that's considered the basic form. In English, we use the present form. So that's just no suffix, no helping verb, just the normal word. The present participle is the ing form, in this case, looking or breaking. Notice the word is there in parentheses because that may or may not be in a sentence, but oftentimes if we're using the word looking as a verb, it's going to have a verb in front of it that we'll call a helping verb here shortly. Past form of look is looked. We simply add the ed to it, even though it has more of a T sound, and that's how we know that's the past form. The past participle is also looked. The difference in the past participle is that it often is going to have a helping verb in front of it, such as has. When we look at break, present participle moves to breaking. The past form is broke, just to remind you that there's irregular ones, words that don't necessarily follow the pattern of always adding ed. That past form is going to be broke, and the past participle is broken. It's not broked or braked, it's broken. And again, we look for that to probably have a helping verb in front of it, such as has. So we have that progression. More definitions. Again, things we've seen before, such as phrase. A phrase we're going to still define as a group of words that performs one job. A main verb, term we haven't really talked about much yet. A main verb is the verb that can stand by itself as the verb. It's the verb that contains meaning. I would also tell you the main verb is the last word in the verb phrase. That's the one that's going to be either action or linking. That's what we call it the main verb because it's the one that is action or linking. The helping verb. There's other terms for it. We'll use helping verb. I think it's one that makes the most sense to most people. Helping verb cannot stand by itself. If it is, it's not a helping verb. It has to help something else. It doesn't help an adjective. It doesn't help a noun. It helps a main verb. So it has to be a verb in front of another verb. The helping verb is going to show verb tense. That will show time, past, present, future. It also can help the verb phrase agree or work with the simple subject. It makes sure if I wouldn't say I has, I would say I have. And that has and have, how that matches up, that's what we call agreement. It matches the use of the word I. Where if it was she has sounds better than she have. So that she has, that's another example of agreement with the verb working with the simple subject. All ing and most en verbs are going to need helping verbs in order to be verbs. So we're going to look, anytime we see ing, we see the en, we're going to look for helping verbs to be in front of those because that's one of our cues to identify where they might be found. So how do we find them? First of all, we have to remember common helping verbs. Again, these are going to look familiar because forms of be, is, am, are, was, were, and will be, we mentioned those as being linking verbs, and they are linking verbs when they're by themselves, when there's no verb after it. However, if any verb follows one of these words, then it's going to be a helping verb, and the word that comes after it is going to be a main verb. Has, have, and had also can be linking verbs, but again, if they're in front of other verbs, then they're going to be helping verbs. Has, have, had will help the verb that comes after it, the main verb. Do, does, and did, those can be verbs by themselves, but if you put them in front of another verb, again, they're helping. It's all about sequence. Others that are common helping verbs: may, might, can, should, will, shall. And again, if we have, should, we have could, we have would. We want to make sure we keep an eye on those things. We're not trying to have a full list here, but just to give you a sense of how they work. If we go back to what we already know, if we know how to find action verbs and linking verbs, then we're going to find those and look both before and after them to see if there's other verbs nearby. Which is why our first step always is to find the verb, all parts of it, because you find one doesn't mean you're done. If you don't find an action verb, look for a linking verb. These notes should look familiar because you saw them on an earlier lesson. Action verbs are more familiar, more common, more comfortable for us to locate. So we're going to look for those first. If we don't find them, then we'll look for a linking verb. Then we're going to look directly in front of any action or linking verbs you found to see whether any helping verbs are present. And I'm actually going to amend that to say look after it as well to see if you see any other verbs, because you may have thought it was a verb or the main verb, but it's actually a helping verb because another verb follows it. And you'll see this more as we do the examples. If the verb is a present participle, that's the ing, the past participle, the ed or en, there must be a helping verb in front of it, or it's not going to be a verb in the sentence. It can do a different job. You can say the window was broken or talk about the broken window. So it's possible for those words to be a different part of speech than a verb, even though they're ing or en or ed. Remember, helping verbs are called helping verbs because they are there to add clarity to the time of the main verb and to agree with the simple subject. In other words, if there's only one verb in the sentence, then there are no helping verbs because they're not helping any other verbs. Let's look at our first example. Several of these movies were released over the summer. First question, what is the main verb? Looking at the sentence, again, looking for action verbs, it looks like released is an action verb. Next question we ask is, are there any verbs before or after that? As we're noticing here, that released can be either past or past participle. It's going to depend on whether we find helping verbs. Any words helping the main verb? Were released. Were is the helping verb and released is the past participle. Again, released can be past, but if there are helping verbs. Since there's a helping verb in front of it, released is the past participle. Notice the difference in the sentence if you don't include the helping verb were. Several of these movies released over the summer. Well, what did they release? The meanings changed. In fact, we use the term the voice of the sentence has changed because the helping verb's not there. It changes our understanding. It also changes the function of the sentence, what it's trying to say and how it's trying to say it. Helping verbs do serve an important function. Another example, she should have been completing her homework last night. What is the main verb? Well, you don't homework someone. Looks like completing. Again, the ing. Completing is the main verb. Completing is an action. And if you're thinking about the verb parts, ing is going to be that present participle. So are there any helping verbs in front of completing? Well, we talked about have. That's definitely one of them. We said could was on the list, or would is on the list, so should is definitely one as well. What about been? Well, if you think about it, been, be, it's a form of be. It's actually the past participle of be. It's adding en to it. So should, have, been are all helping verbs. Because you find one doesn't mean you're done. And again, if you take out the helping verbs, all of them as a set, the sentence would read, she completing her homework last night. Hopefully we all feel like that doesn't sound the way language is supposed to work. So when you look at your sentence, find the main verb, decide action or linking if you're comfortable with that. You don't have to, but you want to see which form it is, present, past, present participle, or past participle, and then find all the helping verbs. Like I said, if you notice been was a past participle, that's a bonus point for you. Again, that's the end of the notes for Grammar Lab 5. At this time, go ahead and hit the pause button or end the video. We'll pick up with the guided practice on our next video.